Hello and welcome to another tutorial. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I painted this very simple and atmospheric watercolor painting, and I really hope you enjoy watching this tutorial. I'm starting by randomly wetting the top section of the paper, and I'm using my largest round brush. And the first color that I'm applying here is my lightest value, is sap green, and I'm using freshly squeezed paint so that I be able to get the strength that I want, because the paper is already wet and we want to have good amount of color pigment on our brushes to have a more vibrant painting. As you can see, there are some white unpainted and dry patches of paper in between these leaves, and this is what I love about randomly wetting the paper instead of wetting the whole surface, and this way we'll be able to have a variety of soft edges and hard edges. While the paper is still damp, I'm adding a few touches of cerulean blue to work as a background showing through the leaves. And now it's time to add the shadow color of the leaves. So this time I mixed a darker green using undersea green and deep sap green. And also the paint is much thicker this time so that I'm able to make these shadow colors hold their shape. So I don't want them to be too wet and spread all over the page. That's why I'm making sure that I have less water on my brush and more thicker paint. Once I was happy with the shape of the leaves, I sprinkled some table salt, and also I'm splattering some of the same colors to create some nice atmospheric effects. I'm now painting the grasses in the foreground, and I'm using the same color that I used for the leaves, but this time I added more water to lighten my color slightly. And I also sprinkled some table salt to create more texture effects. And while the paper is still damp, I'm using the same mixture that I used to paint the shadow parts of the leaves. So basically undersea green and deep sap green, and I'm painting the shadow parts of the shadow coming from the tree trunks that we're going to be painting in a little bit wet on wet. And this time again I have less water on my brush so that these shadow parts don't spread too much on the paper and hold their shape. But I also want them to have soft edges. That's why I decided to paint them wet on wet. Once I was done painting the first layer, I let my paper dry completely, and now it's time to paint the tree trunks. I have mixed a very dark and a grayed down brown to paint the tree trunks using burnt umber and French ultramarine blue. And I'm using my favorite technique that I use very often, so that's painting a shape wet on dry and then using a clean damp brush to soften the edges and create a more atmospheric effect. It's easier to have two different brushes so that you don't have to keep cleaning your brush and softening and waste a lot of paint that way. I recommend you practice this technique beforehand, and then you will have better control and confidence when you are doing it in your painting, because it varies compared to the paper that you're using and also the brush that you're using. For example, rounder brushes usually hold more water compared to flat ones, and also the way your paper performs is very different as well. Arch watercolor paper absorbs a lot of water, and if you want to soften the edges, you can afford to have a little bit more water on your brush without having those cauliflower effects. But if you're using Saunders watercolor paper, you should use a little bit less water to soften the edges. So it's definitely important to practice it so you know how much water you have to have on your brush to create the better effect. I am using Bauhang watercolor paper for the first time for this painting, and I'm actually very happy, and it reminds me of arch cold press, or somewhere between cold press and rough surface. And of course arch is slightly higher quality, but the texture of the paper and the amount of water it absorbs is very similar to arch. And this is the finished piece. I really hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. If you give this painting a try, let me know how it goes, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy painting!